Hello, everyone. My name is Elisa Ewan, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Teachers College. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for the Alumni Career Development webinar series featuring alumna Courtney Brown. The webinar series covers a range of career topics and includes speakers from a variety of backgrounds. The series is co-sponsored by the TC Office of Career Education and Professional Development and the Office of Alumni Relations. Videos of past webinars are available on our website at www.tc.edu/alumni/career-webinars. Today, alumna Courtney Brown presents Creating a Climate for the Growth Mindset to Flourish. Courtney has taught high school and middle school English and Humanities for nearly 20 years. In 1991, she completed her MA in English at TC. In 2008, she moved into full-time work as a coach at TC's Center for Professional Education of Teachers, also known as CPET. As a senior professional development coach at CPET, Courtney works alongside a team of wonderful coaches to support schools, school leaders, and teachers with their instruction and curriculum. Courtney specializes in leadership and literacy and leads the new Teacher Network at Teachers College, which is a network supporting TC alumni in their first 3 years of teaching. Just some quick housekeeping. If you have any issues with the audio, please chat me directly in the chat box. And without further ado, here's Courtney Brown.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking time out in your busy schedules. I'd like to welcome you all out there. I'd like to say hello to any recent or not so recent TC alums. All I'm missing is being able to see you and hear your voices. As you heard, my name is Courtney Brown. I don't have to tell you a lot about my work here because Elisa gave such a lovely introduction. I work at TC CPET, the Center for the Professional Education of Teachers, as an educational coach and consultant. I get to do wonderful work. I feel very lucky. I help to train new coaches and run our organization in addition to working with teachers, administrators, teacher leaders, both in New York City, around the country, and CPET also works globally. You know, at CPET, we work in a range of educational capacities, developing curriculum, facilitating professional development, supporting school leaders and districts, as I said, around the world. We also offer the New Teachers Network, and I want to sort of highlight that. It's a network that's designed to support TC alums in their first 3 years of teaching. We offer workshops, coaching, online networking, all free of cost. So if any of you out there are alums in the first 3 years of teaching, please be in touch, perhaps right after the session. We'd love to support you. Mainly, I'd like to reference all that range of work that we do at CPET, because no matter what the work is, I've recognized there's one commonality. In any context or role, in order to learn new things or change your practice or develop skills, one needs to have a growth mindset. We need to have a motivated mindset that believes that we can learn anything with some effort and some perseverance. So no matter whom you work with in your role, and I mean you, whatever your context is, if you're an administrator, if you teach young students, if you counsel clients, support patients, coach teachers or administrators or other coaches, if your job in any way is to help people learn and develop, I believe it's so important to understand and build a climate for the growth mindset. I've also realized, and of course you guys know that I graduated in '91, so I've lived quite a bit now, that we all need to develop new skills all the time. We need to develop our own growth mindsets. All learners need to have or develop this growth mindset, this motivated mindset that believes you can learn just about anything. So I'm really excited to have you guys join me for this hour to explore the mindset and to also closely look at strategies to create this climate and these conditions for the growth mindset to flourish. Now, as we do that, I would like to hear from you guys. The only thing missing, as I said, to doing a webinar like this is that I'd love to hear from you all. I'd like to know who's out there, what you're thinking, and what some of your questions might be about learning, about motivation, and also about the growth mindset. So here's what I'm asking us to do. I'd like you to please take out your phone or go to your computer and either log onto polev.com/Courtney Brown, no N, 629, or you could try texting. And I'm going to move to a slide in a minute that will have the texting information for you. Now, I have to be honest with you guys. As you're taking out your phones or your computers, I have to be honest that this is a part of the growth mindset for me. I'd never used Poll Everything, and I learned to use it last night. So if I could learn to do it and we can make it work together, then we're all examining our growth mindsets. So whether you've used it before or not, I'd love to invite you to log on and text or type in a question about motivation and learning. The question might be about challenges that you've experienced in your own role or challenges that you've had in your own life, learning something new, or understanding motivation. You might want to preface your question with, as an administrator or as a teacher or a student, and then it'll be really fun for us to get to hear who's out there. So I'm going to move to the next slide, which is going to capture all your questions, hopefully, and it will also offer you some information to text. Awesome. As a teacher, how do I motivate students who do not believe they have the ability? And I'm sorry, I can't see the rest of the question, but I'm so glad that you gave it to us. Awesome. There we go. As a teacher, how do I motivate my students who do not believe they have the ability to learn is probably what it says. I apologize, it's blocked a little. As a teacher, how to keep motivation high and engaging all through the lesson? Absolutely, I've had the same question myself, and that's what led me to really begin to research and think about strategies for a growth mindset. Any other questions coming in? Awesome, thank you everybody. I'm an administrator. Some of my teachers are burnt out after a few years. How do I help them? Awesome questions, guys. As an administrator with 20 plus years experience, how do you self-motivate to keep learning, I think it says, the tech with younger colleagues? Awesome. Yep, these are great, great questions, and I think a lot of us are on the same wavelength. Okay. So as these questions are coming in, I'm going to give a few more minutes to see if anybody else would like to join us or is fiddling with the tech like I was last night. Keep on fiddling, I encourage you, so that you can add a question to our board. I just want to say that I don't know that all your questions will generally be answered, but I think that we will be giving throughout the session enough ideas and food for thought that hopefully you'll come away either inspired or with ideas that you want to implement. How do you motivate your teaching staff? Great questions. Operations manager for a nonprofit. How do I motivate employees who are not moving, I think it says, beyond their current level of performance? Great. This is very helpful, guys, because a lot of us are really thinking about motivation. How do we motivate people? Let's give it another minute. And then by the end of the session, you guys can get back to me and hopefully you're coming away with some ideas about how to motivate people and keep them working. One more minute. We'll see if anybody else is adding a question. Great. How do teachers implement a growth mindset? Awesome. I'm going to jot down some of your questions to keep them in mind. How do I use recognition to increase volunteer participation? Fantastic question. How do you self-motivate to keep learning new tools and tech with younger colleagues? I apologize. That's a fantastic question. I asked myself that. Okay, awesome. I'm going to try to keep all your questions in mind. If by the end of the session your questions were not really answered, please feel free to either add them in at the end of our session with our question and answer component, or get back to me, because I'd love to be able to support you with all these very, very important topics. Awesome. By the way, one idea for motivation is actually using Poll Everything at one of your meetings in your classroom, or perhaps during one of your professional development sessions. It can be quite motivating to be able to type in your question and then see it up on the board or on the smart board. Okay. I'm going to actually move into the next slide. I apologize if anybody else's questions are just coming up. Great. You can see that we're all on the same wavelength a little bit. Great. So in a nutshell, basically, how do we help people learn and develop? I think that what's really key to keep in mind, and that sort of motivates all of our work as educators, is that people need to believe that they can learn. And we need to believe that others can learn and change and grow. We need to understand and know that the brain actually develops new pathways with new learning. So science is showing us that people can change and people can grow. And for us to do the work that you're all asking questions about, I know that we need to challenge ourselves. We need to challenge ourselves not only to be learners, but to see everybody whom we work with as capable of learning and capable of growing. And I know that's a challenge. We're going to be talking a lot and using the term mindset today. And I just want to throw in a really simple slide so that we're all on the same page. I'm going to throw this term around a lot, and it's basically the beliefs and the assumptions that orient ourselves about how we perceive the world, how we perceive others and ourselves. Our mindset guides how we act, think, and respond. And I'd like to posit that in education and in all the work that you're all doing based on your questions, we need to really support ourselves as well as our co-workers and our students and all of our colleagues to develop this mindset. And we need to begin to see each other with the belief and the assumption that we can all learn. So that's another part of the journey that we're going to take today together, supporting ourselves to look at our own mindsets. Because I am an educator and I know some of us like to have some clarity about where we're going today, yes, we do have a few goals for this session. You might get more or something different out of the session, but basically I hope that we can leave having deepened our understanding of a mindset for learning, the growth mindset, that we can reflect on our own mindsets so that we can go back into our work tomorrow and in the future with a little bit more of an understanding of where we'd like to grow, of how we'd like to grow our own mindset so we can support others to do the same. And then the second half of our session, I'm really excited to explore strategies that I think can be extremely helpful and effective to create that climate, culture, and also a classroom to support the growth mindset. We're going to explore real hands-on things that you can implement. Then I'd also like you to be able to think about, what are you planning to try? How would you like to implement some growth mindset strategies in any context? So that brings us to our big question. We looked at the term mindset, and now I'm throwing around the term growth mindset. I'm going to use this term a lot today, and we're going going to do a few minutes of delving into the history of it. What does it really mean? The growth mindset was a term that was coined and also sort of a theory by Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck, you guys might know about, and I might be telling you and reviewing something that you already know. But basically, since the 1980s, Carol Dweck has been a psychological and a psychology researcher, most recently at Stanford University, studying motivation and achievement. She studied students in a few high schools and elementary schools, mainly in Chicago, and some of you might be familiar with this. And she found that many students just shut down when faced with hard or challenging problems. Sounds familiar? But then others were up for the challenges. They took on challenging problems or questions. They persisted and they had a positive attitude. They stuck with the challenges and they didn't give up. This is what we want for our students. This is what we want for all students and all of our colleagues. We want all of us who face challenges, which we do every day, and new things to learn. We want to face them with vigor, motivation, and persistence. But I guess my question and what led me to do some more investigating and research was, if we don't just naturally have these qualities or feel motivated or persistent in the face of challenges, then how can we develop them? Especially now with our so-called 21st century expectations, and I'm thinking about the administrator with 20 plus years, I appreciate that. We need to constantly learn new technology and keep up with things and retool ourselves for new roles and skills. This mindset of growth and I can learn anything, whether it's poll everywhere or some new pupil path system in our school, it becomes increasingly important. So this is what Carol Dweck meant by the growth mindset. It's a positive, motivated mind, a belief system that you can grow and change and that you can learn almost anything. Okay, in a nutshell, and just to go a little bit deeper into this mindset theory, these are kind of the tenets of her growth mindset theory. And I think they're all really important. So let's think about them together. It's the idea that I really believe that intelligence can be developed and grown. Now, that's kind of amazing, especially for me, who grew up with the idea that there was an IQ test. And Carol Dweck, who coined this phrase and this theory, she talks about being seated in her elementary and middle school classrooms by her IQ. And you knew the numbers that were associated with people's intelligences. You basically stayed in your seat, you stayed in your lane. And that kind of determined how far you could go, how much you could learn, and probably what your profession, your job, and of course your income was going to be. So challenging this idea that intelligence can be grown and changed is really challenging some of our most basic understandings about learning and education from way back at the turn of the century. So I'd like to understand that this is a hard one. And there is some science that supports, some neuroscience that supports the theory that it actually can be grown. And we'll get into that later. A growth mindset's also looking around and believing that all people can learn, grow, and change, no matter what they look like, no matter what the color of their skin, how they speak, which neighborhood they're from, how they walk, how they dress, that all people can learn, grow, and change. And I think this is really, really important, especially in our field where we are trying to support and striving to support such a broad range of people to grow and change. Growth mindset also posits that talents can be developed and cultivated. And this is a really key one, right? You're not just athletic from birth or musical from birth. You might have some talents or some inclinations, but you also might be able to develop them. And you might start with some talents, but you can continue to develop from there. So talents are things to be developed, like skills. And then, of course, skills can be built with effort and persistence, that almost anything is learnable. And we'll talk about how we break things down to help people develop and learn skills, how we break things down to support people to actually develop their effort and persistence and motivation. And finally, effort pays off. We need in our educational settings to help people see that effort is actually helping them and pays off. So these are the tenets, and I think that we can all agree they're pretty good. Let's move on. So I think sometimes it's helpful to say, okay, that all sounds so great. Yeah, we all believe that. But what isn't a growth mindset? I think it's also important to understand sort of the inverse or another kind of mindset that Dweck coined the phrase for and talks a lot about, and that's a fixed mindset. We all have fixed mindsets in different ways. I mean, sometimes in math, in cooking, I can't really cook. You have to be a talented cook to learn. I can't really do math. You have to be good at math. I'm an introvert. I can't learn to socialize. So we all have different beliefs that might be fixed. Um, and I think it's important for us to look at our own fixed beliefs so we can challenge them. Fixed beliefs might be that smart people are smart. Some people are musicians, some aren't. Athletes are just born that way. So, what I'd like to do is I'd like us to challenge ourselves to just take a quick little quiz on the growth mindset. And I'd like us to be honest with ourselves about, some parts of me believe in a fixed, that some things are fixed. But in other ways, I have a growth mindset. So where are some of the areas where I'm fixed and why? What does that mean? And where are some of the ways that I really see people and myself as able to learn and develop? So I'd like to do a little bit of self-reflection. The way that we're going to do it is I'm going to show you guys a quiz in a minute, and I'm going to ask that you just either think about or jot down your answers on a piece of paper. So if you have a pen or maybe you want to write on your phone in notes and a piece of paper around just to jot down some answers, that would be great. We're not going to use Poll Everything and be able to share them out with each other, but we're going to be able to take this quiz on our own. So let's take a quick quiz. Growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. We have a series of statements on the left. And by the way, if you ever want to take any of these materials back to your context, I have a lot of these different resources for you, and we could add in lots of questions to the statements, but we're going to start with 7 statements. I'd like you to really be honest and respond to these statements in your head or jotting down on paper. Do you believe this is true or false? Or maybe you don't know. Maybe there's another column. So the first one is, your intelligence is something very basic about you that you just can't change, especially once you're in high school. True or false? Jot it down. And number 2, no matter how much intelligence you have, you can always develop it. And number 3, people are each smart in different ways. And number 4, you are a certain kind of person, and there is not much that can be done to really change that. Number 5, you can always change basic things about the kind of person you are. And number 6, the more effort you put into something, the better you will be at it. And number 7, only a few people will truly be good at sports. You have to be born with it. Okay, so I hope you've taken a moment, and now let's look at what our responses tell us about our mindset according to this model. Growth versus fixed responses. So if the first one is actually a fixed mindset statement. So if you said true to that one, then maybe you're believing something about intelligence that's kind of fixed. And I think many of us do. The second one, if you believe that you can grow your intelligence, then that's more of a growth mindset. Number 3, people are each smart in different ways. That's a growth mindset. And number 4, you're a certain kind of person. There's not much that can be done to really change that. If you believe that or agree with it, fixed mindset. And number 6, you can always change basic things about the kind of person you are. Growth mindset. I'm sorry, number 5. And number 6, the more effort you put into something, the better you will be at it. And 7, only a few people will be truly good at sports. You have to be born with it. Now, I find these quizzes sometimes a little bit, I find that this true false is really oversimplifying, and I'm being honest with you. So, what I'd like to do with your responses to this quiz is just have given you a moment to think about the whole range of possibilities in terms of how we think about people, and to grapple with the fact that as educators, we really need to challenge ourselves. And I speak to myself about this a lot, to look at everybody that we work with, that we teach, as capable of growth and change. And then we're going to dig into some of those strategies. It's quite a challenge, I find. I mean, for example, I really have had a challenge with math in my life, and I really believe that some people are good at it and some aren't. And I've really had to challenge myself on that, even as I've gotten older. So we all have areas. For example, the one about truly being good at sports. I think that yes, there are some people who are going to be outstanding at sports, but some of why they're outstanding is because they put effort into it, not mainly because they were just born with it. So I'd like to kind of keep these things in mind, not as necessarily the fixed or growth responses, but as things to ponder and to think about. Thank you so much for participating in this little quiz. Let's move on. So, the exciting news is that brain science, neuroscience, supports the concept of a growth mindset. It's been proven, and researchers are more and more excited, that the brain really is like a muscle, and that the more you exercise your brain, the more pathways and connections are built, even as you get older, which is good news to me and good news for some of us who are more experienced and moving on in our lives. You can even change your intelligence. So, the interesting thing is that the growth mindset has a lot of scientific support. The brain has neuroplasticity, so it's more rubbery than we thought. It doesn't harden so quickly. So, the more we develop certain thinking patterns or we practice skills, the more we carve out those pathways. They get deeper. We actually change our brains. And I think that this is actually really important information to share and to think about with your staff, with your teams, with your students. There are a lot of awesome short videos and TED Talks about this. I think it's important to really teach your students, whether it's in health class or in English or in advisory, any place, about the brain. It could be in living environment, right? It could be in biology. Let them know every day they come to school that you're actually in your brain gym. So if you're a student who'd prefer to be out running, playing sports, something like that, which I sometimes was as a student, well, let them know that actually they're building their brain power. And it might help to teach students, clients, staff more about the brain as a muscle, and that learning is like lifting weights or practicing a sport or an instrument. You're growing and strengthening your brain, growing your neural pathways. So, this is a little model of the brain, and there are actually some fantastic videos out there. I didn't challenge my tech abilities so far that I have a video in here, but there's some great videos of this that you could use. So I think it's amazing to think that our brain is literally carving pathways as we think. As we think about anything, new or old, we're either creating new pathways or we're deepening existing pathways. And the more we practice or work on something, the deeper the pathways become, the stronger our learning and our memory becomes. So we can kind of think of the brain as a power grid, lighting up in new places as we think about or work on new things. Or maybe a deep forest where we're pushing ahead to create new paths to get to a new and maybe beautiful place. Now, the pathways that we use all the time, with thinking that we do all the time, topics that we think about all the time, or skills that we practice all the time. Think of something you do all the time. Those are deep pathways, and our brain feels really comforted moving into those pathways. This is important. We're going to talk about it a little bit later when we get to motivation. So if you do the same thing over and over, or think about the same thing over and over, you have really nice, deep pathways that your brain quickly and easily, your thinking, your processing, even your feelings automatically move into. So we're literally developing and deepening new pathways with new information. I'd also like to add that all this about brain science it's really interesting to me and important. And obviously I'm not a scientist, so I apologize if anyone is a deep neuroscientist out there and my information is not as deeply scientific as it should be, but I'm just fascinated. Brain science is also starting to begin to make stronger connections between emotions and how we're feeling and our thinking and learning. Things are much more connected in the brain as well as in life. Now, this may not be news to most of us, but science is really supporting and substantiating and furthering the notion that it's not only how you think, but that how you feel is a huge part of how you learn. So, for those of you out there, and for me as an educator in any sphere, in any context, feeling good and having the people with whom we work, we teach, we coach, we support, having them feel good and having them be happy actually supports their learning. And the two are very, very much linked, and there's a lot of proof. So, this idea of social emotional learning, it's actually academic as well. Now, a lot of the questions that we had in the beginning of our session, and I really appreciate them, was how can I get people to be motivated, whether that's staff, whether it's myself to learn new things, or my students, my clients, etc. Why might some learners have a fixed mindset? Why might I have a fixed mindset in some areas? Just harder for me to learn new concepts in math, harder for me to learn tech, right? Well, there might be some underlying reasons, and I know that a lot of us are educators, so there might be some cognitive issues, but it actually has a lot to do with what we just talked about, and that we need to deepen those neural pathways. We need to practice. We need to delve into things. Kind of like Malcolm Gladwell talks about how when you repeat things, he says 10,000 times, you learn them. So let's think about how that ties into a fixed mindset. Now, many of us have experienced failure in some point, in some way in our lives. And many of our students, our teachers, our clients have actually experienced multiple failures. And I'm thinking about our students particularly. And they may not have a strong belief in their own abilities because of what they've experienced in a certain area. They've experienced failures. So if our experiences tell us that we are a failure, that we can't learn or grow in a particular area, then our thought patterns become deeper and stronger, and they move smoothly into the familiar, deepened pathways in our brain. So if we've experienced failure or a lack of success in a certain area, then our brain, as we move into math class for me, as we move into writing for some students, as we move into meeting new people for some of us, whatever it is that's a struggle, our brain naturally moves into those passageways that say, I can't do it, I can't change. Maybe even, I'm a failure, I'll never be able to do this. So, as educators, and for all of us, we need to help change the pathways and develop new pathways in our brain with strategies that help us create and develop these pathways through experience and thinking. So I think that this is what some of our resistant or unmotivated or hesitant learners, whether those are people on our staff, our colleagues, our students, this is what they hear in their minds. This is the voice of their fixed mindset. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't change. And perhaps some of us also think that about our students. So what we see as a lack of motivation may often really be a fixed belief that I can't learn. So my question is, how do we help create a climate and conditions to change this and to help people develop a different voice in their head? Now, I'm just going to pause here and say that I have to mention that the concept of marginalization is very important here. If we, our students, our staff, if we come from a community that's been marginalized traditionally by race, class, any other ways, we may have been told in so many different ways over and over again that we're not worthy, that we're not capable of learning, changing, growing, or developing. And least of all, that we're not capable of learning in certain academic institutions or classrooms. And we're going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about some ways to counter those beliefs and help people develop a new mindset. You guys with me? let's move on. We're going to get into our strategy soon, I promise. So again, I just want to pause here and kind of look at these heads in front of us. The issue with a fixed mindset is that we only believe that we have certain capabilities. We have a skill set, we have our talents. It's sort of like a toolbox and it's closed. And we only have a certain amount of capabilities, and that's it. We can't really change that. I'm at my max. I'm maxed out, right? Don't have any more memory in my computer, don't have any more whatever it takes, no more juice. And failure, when I fail or I do badly at something, well, it's just showing me the truth. I mean, I just can't do it. This is the limits of my abilities. And I give up. And I know that we see plenty of students and perhaps some of our colleagues, and even with ourselves, we see that giving up, right? Not pushing through, not figuring out how to get around a hurdle. It becomes a roadblock. And with the growth mindset in green over here, those roadblocks are challenges. I'm going to move around that. I'm going to keep on going until I find a solution that works. Very problem solving based, right? And failure is just an opportunity to grow. It's not failure, it's a challenge. And that's what we need to help reframe for some of our students, colleagues, ourselves. I can basically do anything I want to. So let's pause here for a minute. We've talked a little bit about the fixed mindset. We've examined ourselves. We've talked a little bit about mindsets and the growth mindset. I think we've talked a little bit about why the growth mindset is so important. And now we're going to move into our strategies. And I'm going to offer you some strategies that I think are quite simple and easy to implement. And there are a lot more out there. So bear with me. We talked a minute ago about how some of our resistant learners, and many of us, we have voices in our head, so to speak. And those voices are saying, I can't do this, and I've never been able to do this. And I'm maxed out. I can't learn anymore. I'm a failure, or I'm going to fail. And basically, our minds, our pathways in our minds that we've developed so well, or that have developed so deeply, are where we go. So, what we need to do, and I know some of you are familiar with this because I've seen them in schools, we have to help our students develop different voices. We have to help everyone we work with listen to a different voice and switch into a different voice speaking in their head. So, I'd like to start with what can we say? What can we say to support the growth mindset? So, in working with our colleagues, whether we're administrators and we're working with our teachers, whether we're teachers with our students, whether we're coaching, whether we're colleagues, we need to learn to praise the effort, not just the results. And I know this is hard for some of us. I know as an educator, I used to feel very positive and enthusiastic, and I would say, great job, wonderful, good answer. And I know that many of us know by now, because we've learned a little bit about this, that we don't just want to praise the results. Because if we just praise the results, then people don't know exactly what it was that they did to get there. And they can't replicate what it was that they did to be successful or to do that great job. So I'd like you all to just think for a few minutes about what's an alternative to saying nice job. Just imagine right now, colleague, one of your teachers, one of your clients or students. Maybe they just finished a project or wrote something or did a math problem or a science lab or helped in the classroom. And you say, nice job. Think about an instance that may have happened today or in the past few days. How could you more specifically offer focused feedback that will help that person to understand that it was the effort and it was what he or she did, not just the results, that were so successful? So think about that. And I'm going to offer, you could say something like, I noticed you kept on trying when those problems got harder. You checked your work to fix mistakes on part two, and you corrected the problem. So what we're doing is we're identifying specifically what the person did. You could get even more specific. I saw you fix that mistake. You went back to number three and you actually redid it. You checked the numbers, you checked your addition, or you went back and you revised you edited your spelling. Or I love the way you're helping your colleagues with the Danielson framework. I really love the way you just did that, PD. That was fantastic. You prepared. I saw your slides. That fourth slide, that was just an amazing slide. Thank you so much. So being specific and helping them understand that it was something they did. What else could we say? Well, then we have the instances where, no, you failed. Sorry. Nah, didn't do so well on that. Yeah, you got a lot wrong. You got a 50. You got a 40. And instead of that, what could we say? Think about a situation you've been in where colleague, teacher, student sort of disappointed you or failed. What kind of feedback could we give in the moment or in writing? Well, we could say, look, you might be working on the addition, or you might be working on your grammar, but you're definitely progressing in the organization. You're definitely progressing in the way you're planning those meetings to a teacher or a colleague. Just take a look, check out what you did. So again, we're getting specific. Or we might say, yeah, you're just not there quite yet. I get it. There's still more work to do. There's always more work to do. I'm always working on X, or I'm always checking my math because it's not great, right? Everything is a challenge until we learn to do it. I mean, when I learned to ride a bike, I can't believe it now, but that took me a long time. Oh, that's actually a true story. Or maybe you say, instead of when I learned to do it, maybe you say, do you remember when you learned to do X? Well, now look at you. You can jump on a bike, and that wasn't easy until you learned. So we can constantly be repeating and supporting these refrains. And eventually, our coworkers, our students, our clients, our teachers, they begin to hear it. And we begin to create an environment where this is the way we speak to each other. And you can reinforce it explicitly. I wish that I could hear from you guys and gather questions right now. We're going to have to wait till the end of the presentation. So please take notes, jot down any questions, and we'll have time for them at the end. So that was what we can say as sort of the educators in the room, or the administrators or the coaches in the room. But how can we inspire the learners in our care, whether that's our teachers, our other coaches, our students? How can we support them to say some of these things, which research has shown will actually change the way they think about themselves? We can actually change the way we see other people and we see ourselves by changing our language. So language is how we think, and how we think is how we perceive the world, and vice versa. So it really can stop a chain of negativity to start to think and speak positively. They're very interlinked. So for example, if a student hears him or herself, or a person hears him or herself thinking, I can't do this, we can offer, I can't do this yet. Or what can I do to improve on this? Or I know I can become better at this, just like I became better at X. Or just like I'm starting to improve. I got a 60 on the last test, now I got a 65, little by little. Or instead of what grade did I get? And this is where we really need to support our teachers, our educational environments, and our students. Let's try not to focus on the grades. Let's try to focus on the improvement, on the effort, on the work that a person is doing, and the specific steps that the person is taking to improve. Now, I've seen some of these posters in schools, and I give you guys kudos for putting them up. I give you guys kudos for thinking about the growth mindset. This is not completely new. But what I'd like to challenge us all to do is to make it a reality. Oops, that's my timer that's telling me that my timing is getting tight. So I'm going to start to move on. So what else? We have to support effort. If we have an effort meter in our classroom, that's great. But how can we go further? How can we actually support redoing, revising, rethinking, and offer people in our lives the opportunity to be rewarded and acknowledged for effort instead of just for the end product? Carol Dweck coined the phrase "not yet." Now, I know one teacher who actually tattooed it, no joke, on the inside of her wrist. If you're out there speaking, I give you lots of kudos for taking it seriously. We don't have to tattoo "not yet" onto our wrists or anywhere else, or we could. But I think it's really important to kind of stamp this into our consciousness. If we can use that phrase, "not yet," or "you're getting there, but we have a little more work to do," then we're going to help people. So my question is, we talked a little bit about what we can say, but what can we do? What are the strategies? One thing we can do is we can point out that all these incredible role models who are out there, all these fantastic success stories that we see in the media all the time, it's great to have role models who either look like us, sound like us, we're from where we come from. I think that's all incredibly important. But what's perhaps more important is finding out how they got there. What were the struggles? Michael Jordan talks about failure and that he failed and failed until he finally figured out how to do it. He didn't even make his basketball team in high school. And all these figures here, we could go by them one by one, and we could do some of that with our students. Oprah, for example. I mean, incredible story that she was pregnant at 14, she lost the baby, and she went back to school. So role models are key. They are important. But what I think is more important are the lessons that lie beneath the surfaces of success. So when we first think about success, any of those people who are on the previous slide, success looks pretty good, right? It's what we see. It's what we see with Kanye, any sports figures. It's especially really obvious with sports figures and athletes because what they do is so concrete and so impressive. Singers, it's also very obvious. But all that success is important to recognize. Hey, you can do it too. If he did it, I can do it. But I think what's more important is that we uncover and emphasize what people needed to actually do to be successful. It's the persistence that got them there. It was the failure. It was the sacrifice, the discipline, hard work, and dedication. These are all the things that people don't see, especially this idea of failure. We need to reframe the notion of failure with our students. We need to create a safe and brave space where they can take risks, risks that they might fail. And then we need to help them understand that with persistence, it's not a failure, it's a challenge, and that you can keep on going, get back up, redo, revise, and continue to learn. So I think it's really important. Now, great, this might be helpful. Let's understand that it takes a lot of work and effort and even failure to become successful. We also need to further break down this hard work and effort into actual steps and strategies so that we can actually do this hard work and manage the failure, the dedication, the discipline. So I would recommend that we take these steps in our classrooms, in our schools, with any of our learners. We break tasks into small pieces. We might set goals, but we need to break them into small pieces that are manageable. And we need to set realistic step by step goals. We can do that with our teachers, we can do that with our students, with our clients, anybody that we're working with. But then the important part is more on the top of this arrow. We actually need to mark the progress. We need to acknowledge the incremental growth. We need to monitor and stay on top of these step-by-step goals. And then finally, we need to encourage and drive people to the accomplishment of the whole task, whether it's a project, whether it's teachers running a meeting, whether it's finishing a book, whatever the goal might be. And we need to celebrate. We need to acknowledge incremental growth and we need to celebrate the accomplishments. As you can hear, this is a lot of positivity and it's really cultivating strength step by step. Now, these could be charts in the classroom, this could be goal setting, but the important piece is that we need to support alongside our learners, whoever they might be, that we're marking it, that we're acknowledging this incremental growth, and then we're celebrating the accomplishments. So I think this is really important. And I know it looks different in every context. It depends on the level of student that you're teaching. It depends on the culture of your school or your business or your organization. But how can you build in these steps for everybody in your context, and how can you support that? Okay, so I'm moving a little bit quickly because there's a lot to say, and I know that I always have to rush at the end. So let's kind of sum it up a little bit. What are our principles of practice here? What are some of the kind of tenets that we have to keep in mind? One is that we need to find and treasure someone to nurture, something to nurture in each person. We need to be able to look at each of the teachers, colleagues, students, especially those that challenge us. We need to find something to treasure and then support. That's really us developing our own growth mindsets in how we see others and their abilities to grow and change. We need to inspire optimism with the positive language that we talked about, with the celebration and acknowledgement of small steps, of small accomplishments. We also need to use language that inspires optimism. We need to work on that deficit model language. We can call each other out in it in a friendly way. We can create cards that our students use in the classroom. We can come up with games so that we're training our brains, training our communities, whether it's our classroom, our schools, or our businesses, to be optimistic and to speak optimistically, to change our brains, to change the way we see each other and ourselves. We need to appreciate differences. We didn't have a lot of time to really delve into this, but we need people to be able to self-examine and appreciate each other for their differences, not their similarities. This might look like learning style surveys, it might look like self-reflection, but we need to create safe spaces where we can appreciate each other's differences and admit our own. And that will also help us develop an understanding of failure, not as failure, but as the risk that we need to take so that we can then challenge ourselves and move on. Basically, and we know this is a basic one, right? We need to really work on eliminating humiliation, blame, and labeling. And I know that's a challenge, but I think that if we begin to work on our language, we begin to work on breaking tasks down, looking at positive goals rather than deficits and what's not happening, we can start to take some of those steps. We need to focus on effort, that effort meter that we had, and you can go back to that in your own time and take a look at it. How do we really use and acknowledge effort? Is it that we let our students, that we let our staff know that, hey, you might have made a mistake or it might not have worked out this time, but we're going to let you redo. We're going to let you revise. Maybe not forever and ever. Maybe there are 5 chances or 3 chances, but we're going to really reward your effort, because not only are we going to acknowledge it and focus on it, but we're going to allow your effort to pay off. You're going to be able to revise your work, redo it, or revisit it. I think this is a really important concept. And that might mean that you take a look at your grading policies school-wide or in your classroom to figure out, am I really, really acknowledging and supporting my students in effort and creating these pathways to success and acknowledging their increments of growth? We're going to move into now kind of a very quick review. I feel like this was so fast-paced, and I apologize. There's a lot more to learn. Here are some of the strategies that we talked about. I've actually added in some strategies that you can use in your school, classroom, or settings that are a little more concrete than some of what we talked about. So I'd like to think closely about targeted and specific feedback, not only to our students, but to ourselves and to our colleagues and the teachers with whom we work, whether we're an administrator or colleague. Goal setting with progress monitoring. There's a lot of talk about goal setting, and I used to set a lot of goals, and I didn't keep them very well. That's the truth, and I know that's typical. So they have to be realistic, and we have to support each other in the goals. We have to revisit them regularly, and they have to be both strategic, you know, the idea of SMART goals, right? Well, they don't just have to be SMART, smart, but they really have to work for us. They have to be bite-sized, and we need to monitor them and acknowledge and check off as we move through our goals. That's why people like video games, right? Because you level up. And so we need to be supporting that kind of vision of leveling up in any way we can. We also need to look at models of success, role models, but through the struggle. We need to create a lens that helps us see other people and see into their struggle, see beneath the surface, and see what the steps were that they took and how if we take those steps, it might help us get there. And then we need to celebrate when we do start to get there. We need to use conferencing and portfolios so that students can see and even our coworkers can see that they're growing. We need to share that with our communities so that we're not just looking at end products. We're looking at process and we're looking at growth and progress. And I know a lot of you are doing this, and I give you kudos. Pat yourselves on the back if you're checking off some of these things because you're already doing them. Mistakes should be celebrated. When students give the wrong answer, or when students try something and they make a mistake, we should always, in a very calm and confident way, say, "That's awesome. So glad you tried that. Wow, so glad you brought that up. I always learn when I make mistakes," right? And we should really support them to make mistakes and not opt out and not shut down. We also need to come up with multiple pathways to success. It doesn't mean that everybody has to be good at the same thing. And we need to recognize and offer our students multiple pathways, whether that means ways that they can get good grades or graduate. We know that's an issue. Or if it's a way for all of the learners in our care, whether they're teachers or adults, multiple pathways for them to be successful. And I know that some of you are out there really thinking about these things. Some of this is just confirming what you're doing. We also need to break things down into clear steps and scaffolding. And that kind of comes back to the goal setting with progress monitoring. In our classrooms and in our schools, things really need to be clear. And people really need to feel that there's a safety net and that things are scaffolded and broken down. If you don't need things to be as scaffolded and broken down, then they don't have to be. But clear steps to how are we going to accomplish this initiative, right? Or how are we going to finish things? And then finally, I encourage everyone to teach brain science, not just put up our beautiful effort posters or our wonderful growth mindset language posters, which are all awesome, but to actually teach our staff and understand ourselves that our intelligence can be grown and that this idea of the growth mindset is actually real, that we really can change and learn, and that science is supporting it more and more. So, in our quick run through with the growth mindset and some strategies, I would also like to invite you to end our session with the same question that I began with. How can we create a climate for the growth mindset to flourish? What are you going to do in your schools, in your classroom? Just take one step. That's part of the growth mindset. Just try one thing and see how it goes and stick with it. And whatever you try, break it down into steps and acknowledge the steps that you take. Acknowledge the small successes and celebrate the things that you try and stick with them. So I'm encouraging all of us to ask ourselves this question. And I know that I gave you some ideas. Hopefully, I gave you some strategies, but I'm sure I didn't give you the final answer and unlock the answer and the toolbox with all the strategies for creating this climate for the growth mindset. So, what I'd like to offer to you guys is in the last few minutes that we have together, love to hear any of your questions. You're going to be texting them in to Elisa, who's our moderator, and she's going to be funneling them to me, and then we can discuss them. Any questions that I don't get to today, I apologize. I can get back to you guys. And I also encourage you to get in touch. Keep in touch, and I'm serious about this. We have some wonderful offerings, and some of them are free of cost and extremely supportive of administrators, of schools and districts, of a wide range of content to support you in your schools. Because this is the work that we do, and this is why I'm doing the growth mindset, is to support you guys to continually improve and support the people and the learners in your care. So my address is here. You know how to get in touch with me. You can start to text your answers into Elisa.
Hi,
And
everyone. So if you have some questions, feel free to send them to me in the questions pane. I do know that we're a little past 6 p.m., so if you do have to log off, please make sure to jot down Courtney's email address to send any questions you have her way. We'll do maybe one or two questions just because I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So we already have one question in. And the first question is, we are often told to play to your strengths. So focus on what we're good at rather than trying to improve what we're not good at. So how does growth mindset play into this?
I love this question. Yes, thank you, whoever you are. I'm going to give you a surprising answer, and I mean it. You definitely have to cultivate your strengths, and I think you definitely have to play into your strengths. What playing into your strengths does is it gives you a springboard from which to feel successful. And when you build on success, you then feel successful. You create those neural pathways in your brain that say, hey, I'm pretty successful. I can do this stuff. You're building on your talents, but you're becoming more and more successful. So your effort pays off, and you also can see and experience success. Then you know what you do from there. Then you say, okay, I'm feeling pretty good. So, in what ways do I need to grow? Where do I need to learn? Right? How do I need to develop? And in what area? So, you build off your strengths. We cultivate strengths in order to then be able to grow our areas of weakness or areas where we need to grow. So I'm giving you a complicated answer. We really need to do both. And we need to help our students and all of our staff not only feel, but truly experience even small moments and then, of course, larger moments of success. So cultivating strengths and playing and building to our strengths is a part of this component and building a mindset. Thank you so much for the question. I hope that helped. Maybe.
If you have any questions, please feel free to submit one. I'll wait for a couple of seconds and then see if anyone submits anything. If not, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Courtney directly, please make sure to write down her email address and shoot her an email. Looks like we don't have any more
Okay.
questions, so that sounds great.
Thank you.
Courtney, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with the TC community. A video of this presentation will be available on our website. Again, that URL is www.tc.edu/alumni/career-webinars. Please visit our website for more information about our monthly webinars and upcoming events. We hope you can join us for our next webinar, which is called The Craft of Creativity, on April 18th with alumnus Matthew Cronin. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.